The Secret of Flight, a series of programs on aerodynamics. Program 6, Propulsion. Your host is Dr. Alexander Lippisch.
Let me tell you a little fairy tale. Once there was an old windmill, and when the wind blew across the country, its arms moved around and around, and it worked for all the people in the country. And this went on for a long time. But finally there came a smart man, and he, believe it or not, took the windmill off and made a propeller out of it. Now, what is a propeller and how does it work? Well, we could, for instance, imagine it as just wings. Instead of going each one forward and making lift, they go around. And while they go around, they also produce lift. And this lift of each of these wings is transmitted to the shaft, and on the shaft it gives then what we call the thrust of the propeller. Thrust and lift are actually the same thing. On the other hand, since now such a propeller has the task to pull an aircraft through the air, this propeller moves not only around, but it moves also forward, and it screws itself into the air. If you would think the air would be a solid matter, then each revolution would give the propeller a certain amount of forward motion, what we call the pitch of the propeller, like we call it a pitch of a screw. Well, therefore, now, this wing couldn't be just straight, but it should be warped, because the outer blades make a much larger peripheral way, while the inner ones make just a small one, while all the parts have to go with the same speed forward. Therefore, it is a wing on a spiral surface. Here you see a spiral surface like this, and you can imagine that each of these little sticks represent the position of a propeller blade while it goes once around. And we have to put then the propeller on such a surface which is here steep and there gradually or more flat. We can see that also if we take a propeller model like this here. Look at it. You see that this is warped, and we have inside the steeper angles and outside the more flat angles. But itself, if we take a piece out, we see that each section looks exactly like a wing, as we had our wings in the smoke tunnel. Now, to observe the action of such a propeller, we have here a model in our wind tunnel. This model is just a tiny propeller driven by a small electric motor. You know, we have only 3 inches width in this smoke tunnel, so this propeller is quite small. You see it here mounted in the tunnel. And when we now turn the electric current on, then You see, it runs and draws the air through the tunnel. If we start now the tunnel itself and produces some smoke, then we see at once the flow picture around a propeller. Isn't it interesting? You see, in front, the air is sucked into the prop and is accelerated actually before it hits the propeller disc. And then behind it, it again is pushed out. So we have a pressure differential across the propeller which pushes the air backwards. You see it even probably better if we just cut the speed off and let the propeller itself make the flow through the tunnel. Now we can also turn this propeller and give him angle of attack, and then we have the action as a helicopter rotor, which is nothing than a propeller which is now inclined to make lift and propulsion. You see it here very well. And we also can take a little less speed that you see this action more distinctively. But the best we can see it if we look at a slow motion pictures which we have now here. There it is. There we see the propeller in the smoke tunnel and taken with high-speed pictures. We have also pulsated the flow so that you can see the velocity distribution across this propeller. Now we have the same propeller in an inclined position, and we see now very clear how we could make it lifting and propelling. You see, the shift of this timeline is actually the same as we had it with the high lift wings. That means we have lift here. And also thrust, since the propeller is inclined, so part of the lift is a horizontal component which pulls the thing forward. That is like a helicopter would fly. We have seen the last time at these pictures in the smoke tunnel that we can use a propeller not only for a propulsion device but also as a lifting device, and we have even seen this in the slow motion pictures with the pulsating smoke, how the flow went over and gave lift and forward thrust. Now here we want to make a little test to see how much such a propeller would lift. We have a little model propeller here driven by an electric motor, and this is fastened to an arm which moves around here. And there we have a weight which we can shift so that we can finally load the propeller so much that it just barely lifts this weight. Now let's turn this prop on. You see, I have here a power supply, and we can see here the voltage and the amperage which we put in this little motor. You see, now it has about 10 volts, 15, 20, 25. There we are. So it lifts at 28 volts. You see it floats. Now we can shift that weight over there and give a little bit more power. Now let's shift the weight further on. And still lifts. Now let's put the weight here. There we are have it so loaded, so much loaded, then it wouldn't lift itself anymore. So that's the limit with all the power on. As you see, 33 volts. Now, can we do better? That's the question. Well, let's think about it. First of all, you see, when this propeller turns around, then it makes pressure underneath and suction above. That means it has a differential pressure across its disk. And since there is open air on both sides, this pressure on underneath will equalize against the suction which you have above, and you will have a flow around the peripheral line of this disk. So you lose some of the pressure which we have from underneath. What could we do about it? Well, if we put a tube around, then this pressure could not equalize around the tips, and we would have more lift of such a propeller. We should house it. Such a housing we call a shroud. That's like this piece here. See, and we can put this shroud around this propeller and then try whether we wouldn't have more lift if we put the whole thing in a tube. You see, we can put it over here. You know, and we can try how this propeller within the shroud would lift. Actually, I have the weight at the same place where the open propeller didn't lift anymore. And I have put the shroud on it, which also weighs something at least. Now let's try. You see, we begin with low power and turn it up 15, 20, 25, 30, 'Aha! We don't even have the full power on, and it lifts. That means we have increased the lift of the propeller considerably by putting just a shroud around, housing it. Actually, this lift increase in a larger scale is in the range of 60% more lift. Now, to explain it to you more particularly, especially the flow condition which we have around such a shroud, we can see again a shrouded propeller in the smoke tunnel. So we have put a little shrouded propeller in our smoke tunnel. Actually, that is the propeller model which we did have before, you see, and on both sides we have put a wing-like section on it so that we have a channel through which the flow has to go now. We couldn't make a round shroud, otherwise you wouldn't see the flow inside. Now let's start the tunnel and the smoke. And we might see then how this propeller works. Here you see it first without the action of the propeller. You see that there is quite a bit of drag behind it because that wake shows that there is turbulence which makes drag. Now if we start the little propeller, watch this. Then, as you see, large part of the air is drawn into the thing and accelerated, and also the outer streamlines come near to the sections so that we have practically no drag due to turbulence over the shroud. We can even see it better if I stop the smoke, as it looks here, to see how strongly this pulls. And when I turn now the model, then we can see it, how it would work with an angle of attack. So as a propulsion and lifting device. But all these actions you observe even better if we go back to our slow motion pictures. And there you have it. Here first, the action of the shrouded propeller as a straight propulsion device giving only forward thrust. You see how the air going towards the shroud is propelled because our timeline bends forward in the center. Now if we have it inclined so that you see at once the velocity field around such a device, and you see very clear that we have lift as we had lift on the wings because we have the shift of the timeline. You see on the other hand how this air which goes through the shroud itself is propelled and comes out much earlier, the little smoke cloud, than the other smoke from the timeline. We see therefore that such a device can be used as a lifting and propelling agent for an aircraft. The shrouded propeller is the simplest example of what we call an internal flow system. That means a flow which now is completely enclosed. And since we have it enclosed, we can guide it as we want it. And as we have seen, first of all, it is the most efficient lifting device. On the other hand, it is also high efficient in forward motion. Well, this brought me to an idea to take the shrouded propeller as the design element for an aircraft which would fly now without wings. And we call it the Aerodyne, that means a dynamic flying airship. Just look at this little picture here. I will explain it later to you more carefully, but to give you a glimpse of it, there our Aerodyne model consisting of a row of 4 shrouded propeller flies through the hangar in a test flight. It's propelled by 4 electrical motors, as you have seen it here in our little model. We can use the propeller also for another purpose. You see, we have seen that when we put the propeller in the tube, we have a larger pressure differential across the propeller. And if we make a very efficient propeller, then what is it? It is actually nothing than a compressor. Now, the main thing is that the pressure differential is as large as possible, and therefore, instead of using just 2 blades as a usual propeller has, we can use several blades which then cover most of the area of the propeller disc, as you see it here. We have here a tube with electrical motor and a little multi-blade propeller, which we also call an axial blower or a one-stage axial compressor. You will see that with such a device you can even get a, well, good pressure differential in one stage. I will show it to you here. See, we have here our pressure gauge as we used it before. And if I turn the power on, then we can read the pressure differential across the propeller. See it here? Now I turn the power on more and more. And you see it gives a nice pressure differential of about 2 inches of water. Then if I close it down so that less air goes through, then this differential gets even larger. Now what we do here with one stage in a simple little model, you can do in larger size, and you can put several of these compressor stages behind each other, and in this way create a large compression. And when you then take the air which you have compressed, heat it up and blow it through the turbine and let the turbine run the compressor, then you have what we call a jet engine. A jet engine is actually nothing than a multi-blade shrouded propeller, which is here called the actual compressor. This is this part of the jet engine. Now, due to these many stages, there are jet engines up to 14 stages in this compressor. You get a large pressure ratio from the inlet to the outlet of the compressor, where we now blow the compressed air into a combustion chamber, burn it, increase the volume, and then blow this hot gas against a turbine, which takes part of the power out of this heated flow, turns it back through the shaft into the compressor so that you drive the compressor with this part of the power, and the other power goes out as the jet stream. The thrust actually is produced by the compressor part of the jet engine and partly by the inlet. I will not go too far into the explanation of this process, which is actually in many ways more thermodynamics than aerodynamics. I just want you to realize that a jet engine is actually also a propeller device, since it has these compressor stages which are nothing else than a multi-blade propeller. Now, to show you such action in the smoke tunnel, we couldn't put such a device with these many blades in our tunnel, and we have made this simpler. We have made a small model of a jet engine, the cross-section of it, and instead of driving it with such a complicated device, we have a little jet stream in it. Now here we have the model in the wind tunnel, and at the present time the blower is not yet on. Now let's turn on the blower, and you see at once that the propulsion which we have inside gives us a strong stream behind and also pulls all the outer air towards this body and smoothes out the flow. A very interesting effect. You see, when I turn the speed down, then even this effect is stronger. Now we can also show it with angle of attack, and there you see it. But the better representation is when we look at the slow motion films of this device. Now we see the jet model in the tunnel in a straight attitude, that means with no angle of attack. We took this picture with so-called pulsating smoke, and you see in this way very well the velocity. First of all, you observe that the stream which goes in there comes out much earlier due to the inner propulsion. You see now back there this puff coming out. And on the other hand, you see how nicely the outer streamlines follow the outer shape of this jet. This is due to the fact that the jet stream back there stabilizes the flow. Now you see it with the angle of attack, and you can observe the same effect. It's very stable and smooth. And on the other hand, you see now that we have lift, because we have this shift in the smoke front, the so-called time line. That means we produce here not only the jet stream inside, but we also produce a lift due to the flow on the outer surfaces of such a propulsion system. That is also used to make what I told you once, this aerodyne. The last of the propulsion systems which we want to mention here is the rocket engine, which will probably carry men into space. It can therefore not be an air-breathing system, but it must apply the oxygen and the fuel in two different lines which come into a combustion chamber and then get burned there and blow out a high-speed stream into the air. You see such a thing here in the smoke tunnel. In our next program, we will talk about the drag as it exists on bodies and wings. And to introduce this to you, we have here a body in the wind tunnel where you see what we saw before, the big disturbance which is caused by such a body. But we have also done a trick. We have inserted here a little jet stream. And if we turn on the jet stream, you will see that we can reduce the drag. That means if we compose a body with the right propulsion system, we have an advantage of such a combination as you see it here. And this we will explain at the next program. Goodbye and auf Wiedersehen.
You have just seen Propulsion, the sixth in a series of programs explaining the secret of flight. Your host has been Dr. Alexander Lippisch, Director of the Aeronautical Research Laboratories of the Collins Radio Company. This program was produced for the Educational Television and Radio Center by the State University of Iowa.